This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein, and welcome to Saving America. From time to time, Saving America hosts a panel discussion on issues of broad public concern. Today, we're going to discuss Leadership Institute's campus reform. First, the Leadership Institute, founded by Morton Blackwell in 1979, is a nonprofit whose motto is that it turns conservatives into leaders. It provides training and mentorships. LI reported training over 300,000 conservatives to date. I met Mr. Blackwell around 1999-2000 when I was active in the DC area. Second, campus reform is a project of the Leadership Institute. It's described as America's leading site for college news. In turn, it acts as a watchdog over higher education with a focus on exposing left-wing bias in higher education. It holds itself to high standards for journalism that is accurate and objective. Today, we have two representatives from campus reform, Dr. Zachary Marshall and Dr. Matthew Garrett. Dr. Marshall is the campus reform editor-in-chief. He earned his PhD from George Mason University and is adjunct assistant professor at the University of Kentucky. His writings appeared in the Daily Wire, Fox News, The New Criterion, American Spectator, Washington Times, Human Events, and the Washington Examiner. He's appeared on Fox News, News Nation, Scripps, Salem, Real America's Voice, Newsmax, and the National Desk. Zachary is a member of the National Association of Scholars and the Academic Engagement Network. Dr. Matthew Garrett is a higher education fellow with Campus Reform. He is a recently retired professor of history and ethnic studies at Bakersfield College. Dr. Garrett's colleagues repeatedly elected him to campus-wide office, received numerous awards, including institution's Lifetime Leadership Award in 2021. He's also an award-winning author with research and publications in Native American history, and his musings appear in both popular and academic journals. Dr. Garrett risked his reputation and tenure to question partisan policies and expenditures at his previous college, result in a highly publicized series of moves by the administration and his lawsuit to defend the free speech and rights of faculty. That has been settled. Dr. Garrett is founder of the Renegade Institute for Liberty and has launched the California Curriculum Center after retiring from academia. He's returning for his second visit with Saving America. And so just to get started, now that we've spent half the show doing the introductions, Dr. Marshall, why is there a need for an organization like Campus Reform?
Campus Reform started in 2009 as a watchdog for liberal bias in higher education. And the problem is that higher education has moved so far left so fast over the last 2 decades that we are now reorienting our mission to expose leftist bias in higher education. We need voices like Campus Reform and the students who expose the bias and abuse for us on a freelance basis, because conservative voices are sidelined and marginalized in higher education. Professors and staff have way too much power to decide what's normal, what is acceptable, and what can be deemed unnormal and what can be deemed unacceptable. And usually that benefits leftist students and penalizes conservative students. And that is not the point of education. So we need external voices like Campus Reform to hold these people accountable.
That sounds good. So what are some of your major accomplishments so far? You've been around for a little while, not real long.
Yeah, I've been at Campus Reform since 2021, and I've been editor-in-chief for the last 3 years. And during that time, one of the biggest undertakings I've led and we have done is exposing anti-Semitism in higher education. Prior to October 7th, no one wanted to talk about it. No one wanted to acknowledge it. I was the first journalist in the country to write about campus anti-Semitism after the October 7th attacks, and I submitted 33 Title VI complaints against universities that failed to protect Jewish students in this fall 2023 semester. That's resulted in 16 federal investigations and $210 million in cut federal funding at Princeton University.
Wow, that's quite a schedule. You know, I have multiple degrees like both of you. As far back as I can remember, it seemed that college students naturally leaned left Not all of them, of course. Is this a result of faculty inculcation or other factors? Both, if you please.
I would say that the problem really started about 40 years ago when we had postmodernist theory, when we had critical theory, and we had the protest politics of the 70s and 60s become mainstream and become dominant on college campuses. And this process happened in the late 70s to 80s. And since then, we've had subsequent generations of professors and graduate students get promoted in the university and then train the next generation of students and the next generation of professors to not just be liberal, but be rabidly leftist and Marxist in a lot of cases, and learn how to weed out and promote students according to their political ideologies. So this has become a systemic and institutionalized problem since the 1980s.
Yeah,
Matthew?
I would agree with that entirely. I think you can look back to William F. Buckley's God Man at Yale, 1951, starting to see that happening. And then by the 1960s, things really start to go off the rails. The new left that becomes so aggressively partisan, so disdainful of Western values, the postmodern movement that wanted to just tear down the concept of truth and anything good and then replace it with these new Marxist ideologies. It really became dominant by the 70s, and hiring a lot of those activists into the academies in the 60s and 70s, so that by the 80s, we have University of Chicago professor Alan Bloom writing The Closing of the American Mind, where he outlines how the academy has gone off the rails away from seeking truth and trying to help improve people to just this wonky advocacy center that really is doing far less good than it should be doing.
Well, yeah, I would certainly tie it to the late 1960s. I started college in, I hate to admit this on the air, but 1969. And I came from a military family. I was from the other side of the tracks, the oldest 7 kids from an enlisted man, and grew up, very, very financially challenged, and won a scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I showed up there, and I felt so completely out of place as a natural conservative to have the protest against the Vietnam War. I remember walking past the famed statue of Benjamin Franklin in the middle of the campus, and people sitting around the base of the statues doing weed, and out in public, and a lot of very anti-capitalist approach to life. And it's funny because part of Penn's fame is its Wharton School of Economics, first school of business in the United States, and to see what I experienced there. And so I definitely saw it in the classroom. I would say the business school was kind of a saving grace for me. I ended up over there, started as a pre-med, but I understand exactly what you're saying is that it was a very overwhelming, and the teachers were in the social sciences were very far left already, and I could see where that was going to happen. And of course, Zachary just mentioned Princeton, which of course is immediately up the road from Penn. They're less than 40 miles apart. And so this has certainly been a disconcerting trend, and it's been at it for a while. So that is a tough situation, because you've got something that's been going on for 50 years now, and the question is, well, how do we get some balance in higher education? Dr. Garrett, you wrote an important article about the extraordinary level of fraud in the California community college system. What's going on out there? You're very familiar with this. My understanding is it's a huge operation. I think the largest in the country, isn't it?
Yeah, the California community college system is massive. It's got over 100 schools. It's got over 1 million students. I think it's massive, and was it 1 million? That might not be right, but it's definitely a gigantic system, and it's got gobs and gobs of money, billions of dollars flowing through it. That's really not been managed the way it ought to be. We've seen the recent case of students or individuals pretending to be students, creating fake accounts logging in, creating accounts, enrolling for classes, collecting financial aid. And then the colleges, because the way the system is designed, the colleges get paid as well. So there's an incentive to just encourage this. Now, colleges are working to try to fix it, but it is a widespread problem. And part of it stems from this ideological obsession with inclusivity and making sure everyone has access, to the point that there's really no safeguards against fake students coming in. And it also is a program that's really designed to pay for enrollment. So it doesn't matter if you're succeeding or learning, or if it's doing a good job as an institution, it's going to pay for names on papers, on spreadsheets, on rosters. And so we really are seeing a concern with this lack of accountability and an abdication of excellence and preference of equity and inclusion. There needs to be a place for students in the community college system to come and learn, but we also need to have some sorts of standards, some rigor, some assessment to make sure these are actual students, so that our monies are not being spent on fraudulent students.
Well, do you think that there is a turning point happening in California, because a state that was so successful and had such huge surpluses suddenly has, well, the city of Los Angeles is under an incredible financial situation. And I just saw that in the news recently, but the state itself is hundreds of millions of dollars in the hole. It's probably in the billions. They just haven't gone public with the real numbers. Do you think that there will be are you seeing any type of a change as a result, just financial necessity?
Actually, in California, they're increasing the budget on spending. They're going to keep spending money on that. And there's a proposition from the 1970s that mandates that the money spent on education, Prop 98, I think it is, needs to be a reflection of the statewide budget. And as the budget increases, so does education. And this is resulting this year in an increase in expenditures. So I assume from that the budgets also must be increasing, because I know the budget for education is increasing. And that again is driven by these enrollment numbers. And there's lots of ways to inflate those numbers. We're seeing strange practices to inflate the numbers to justify more spending. We're seeing credentialing, because the new program will give you more money for credentials. So we're seeing artificial credentials created you can get a certificate for field trips, and that gets money to the school. Or you can move a program to a remote campus and make everyone drive an hour. And that appealing to rural students gets you more money to the school. Or you can open up a branch in an institution for incarcerated students, and that gets you additional money. Or dual enrollment. We're seeing a huge push for reaching out to the 8th graders to start enrolling every 9th grader in college, because that's more students. It doesn't matter that they're not academically or intellectually or mature enough to participate in college. We're going to enroll those students because every name we get increases the budget.
Wow, that's an incredible situation. I really anticipated that with the financial problems, they would crank that down. It doesn't sound good. Of course, we haven't even talked about the issue as California's, kind of been a massive sanctuary state, and a lot of these people are not here in the United States legally, and I suspect that's a large number of the people that are improperly in this community college financial aid system.
Yeah, actually, the college system will grant them colleges additional funds for enrolling those students. So there's an incentive to enroll those students, which is, completely a strange phenomenon.
Just amazing. Dr. Marshall, you've written articles about the challenges in restoring sanity to the Ivies like Harvard and Columbia. How did those organizations get so far off track, and what needs to be done to correct things?
Well, the situation we have now is a result of no viewpoint diversity at those institutions. They've become echo chambers because there's no conservative, never mind no moderate liberal telling them you're crazy and you're out of line. And that has inculcated a culture of entitlement and hubris, in which they think they can get away with not protecting Jewish students, with undermining American values and curriculum, and creating a campus environment that prioritizes social justice activism over traditional educational values to, be a place of higher learning. And this is all being done while tuition keeps going up every year and the endowments keep growing. So now we're at a tipping point where America is really fed up and saying, you have tens of billions of dollars each in your endowments. Why don't you use that instead of our tax money to run these ideological summer camps instead of making us subsidize the way you have ruined higher education and the education sector in this country?
Well, it's a pretty tough deal. As I mentioned a minute ago, I actually saw this in, of course, one of the other Ivy's pen. And when I hear these salaries, I mean, when they had the president of Penn on, being interviewed by Congress, I guess that was right about a year ago. It was stunning, and to find that the person wasn't terminated, that she stopped being president, but she was still on the faculty of the law school, I seem to recall.
The same thing happened at Harvard when Claudine Gay resigned her presidency after her congressional hearing early last year. She stayed on the Harvard faculty and makes a reported $900,000 a year. As a pro-free market conservative, I have no idea with paying top dollar for top talent, but there's no argument to be made right now that people like Claudine Gay or Liz McGill, who you just referred to, are top talent. They have overseen institutional rot and moral decay in their institutions, and we need better leadership at universities. And that really has to be on the burden, has to be placed on the board of trustees, because these are the people that are approving and supporting these ineffective university presidents. They're the ones who are signing those salary agreements, and they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for the financial health and the overall well-being of the campuses.
When I hear these numbers, it's stunning. In my other profession, I'm a full professor at the nearby little Catholic university, and these people are making 7 and 8 and 9 times my annual income in 1 year. I mean, the disparity, and I'm out there cranking the truth. It's just unthinkable. Are you seeing any change in the horizon? Of course, we know about schools like Hillsdale College, famously doesn't take any federal money. You've got some very successful Christian colleges. One, of course, Pat Robertson founded in Virginia, and you've got Lynchburg College, and you've got just there's a lot of interesting institutions, but they tend to be religiously affiliated. Hillsdale is not, but a lot of the my school is not. My school's Catholic, but one of the concerns I have is that people get the big paintbrush out, and not all of the schools have gone woke. We're trying our best, but we're dealing with a lot less visibility, and just frankly, much smaller numbers of students. I mean, the big Ivies are running 20,000 plus students through their systems. We've got 3,500 students, so we're kind of outnumbered.
Yeah, well, one of the trends we're reporting in campus reform is a mass exodus from the Ivies, from the elite universities that are concentrated in California and the Northeast. Students are flocking to Southern schools in particular because while they are looking for schools that are more patriotic and less tolerant or intolerant of campus-spread terrorism, such as you see on the quads of Yale University or Columbia University, they're also discovering that SEC football is kind of fun. And so we see more and more students going there, and we see more and more students going to state schools in the interior of the country and to smaller schools like you just mentioned. So I think the calculus of what makes a good school and what's going to become the new dream schools and the more sought after schools is going to change. I think the national rankings are going to look different in 5 to 10 years than they do now. And that's because there's just this boycott happening where people are saying, you know what, no thanks. I've decided that you're no longer a good school. And I think Columbia and Harvard are dealing with irreversible reputational damage for the next generation.
And there are different, anecdotal pieces. One of them that got a lot of publicity about 18 months ago was a federal court system announced they would no longer take law students out of Yale University Law School. They said the law school was so out of sync with teaching basic law principles that the students weren't qualified to be in the federal court system. So I think when you see pieces like that, and our judiciary generally not regarded as the hotbed of conservatism. I mean, certainly there's some there, but I think that was more of an objective statement that we've lost focus on fundamental education, and it's a stunning situation. And I know that I was talking to a student the other day, one of my undergraduate students who's applying to a special program at Columbia. And I was very honest. I was pushing him. He's applied to 3 other universities, and I was pushing him away from Columbia in favor of schools that might not be necessarily less liberal, but at least a little less crazy. And I always found it interesting with this issue of anti-Semitism, because you've got 2 family groups, and I know this can unfortunately sound a little politically incorrect, but you have Asian families and Jewish families have historically put a lot of pressure on their kids to succeed in the lower grades and to go to the best possible colleges. And yet the Ivies in particular, and of course the big Supreme Court case was brought by Asian students, not Jewish students, but Asian students who said they were being discriminated against at Harvard. And of course, Harvard lost that case. But it's interesting because you have people who invest in their children. That's why I did well in high school, because my parents were crazy, and neither of my parents went to college. But they were like, "You're going to go to college. You're going to go to college. You're going to go to college." I went to college. I mean, in fact, all of us did, all 7 of us did. And it's just interesting because it's like, if you're going to discriminate against somebody, why would you pick the people who make the investment to get their kids to work hard and study hard?
I think it's not just the government, but also the private sector that is forcing this cultural correction we're seeing. In addition to what you just said about Yale law students, we also saw a year and a half ago that major law firms in New York, were saying we're not going to hire Harvard law students who were engaged in the campus protests.
Mhm.
You're also seeing mega donors who are successful businessmen in the country pull their money out of planned donations. The Ivies have lost billions of dollars over their mismanagement of their campuses. Never mind, the anti-Semitism that is wreaking havoc still at those schools. And we're also seeing a lot of corporations, especially in the tech sector, like IBM, like Google, come out and either soften or eliminate 4-year degree requirements for hiring, because one thing that has really crystallized for Americans of all backgrounds in the last year and a half, while we're seeing this anti-Semitism crisis unfold, is that diplomas are becoming worth less every day, and having a college degree is no longer a guarantee of preparedness socially, intellectually, or any other kind of maturity quality that you can succeed in the workforce or in society after graduation. So I think the free market here is really playing a heroic role in forcing this culture shift to actually happen and take place in higher education.
Dr. Garrett, you recently wrote about the remedial math class at Harvard. What is happening there, and why is this relevant? What could lead to one of the most prestigious universities in the world needing to offer remedial math classes?
Well, it's the same sort of ideological takeover that we've been discussing. Now we're seeing at Harvard the effort to be so inclusive that they are dropping standards of rigor and excellence. And this is, of course, disheartening not only for students who are not admitted because they're displaced by students who really aren't prepared to succeed, but it's also troublesome for the students who are admitted that are not well prepared, that are not likely to succeed, or that are going to force courses to sort of dumb down their content and able to help those students get through. So it's a real loss for everyone across the board when a prestigious institution, a highly selective institution, chooses to admit students who are ill prepared to succeed. We have a really robust higher education system that has a place for many, many people who want to learn and grow and improve their station in life. And there are many institutions that students could apply to and could succeed at. But when we see one tier of institutions sort of harvesting ill-prepared students from that are less prepared, that has a cascading effect, because not only are those students coming into Harvard ill-prepared, less likely to succeed, dumbing down courses there, but they're going to be extracting students who might have been attending a good state school that now won't be able to attend there, and that state school is going to draw students who might have been at a less selective school, and so it cascades down, creating a mismatch all across the system and really damaging all sorts of people. It's detrimental to the entire educational system and to the students it's intending to serve.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, I have seen in the news just in the last couple months, maybe, that this is tending to reverse. I haven't heard it about Harvard, but I've heard about a number of universities that the allegation was, or the claim was, is that due to COVID, I guess students couldn't take the standardized test, which I never believed, or they thought the students were damaged by not having full education during COVID, but they stopped taking, of course, the classic test is the SAT, right, to get into college.
You're absolutely right. So we've often seen Harvard using the SAT as a very selective tool to make sure they had the best students. And they would take students who on the math score were scoring in the 700s typically. And then they and other institutions chose to get rid of the SAT during the pandemic, arguing that there was a learning loss. But we actually still see students taking the SAT, and we can see the results. And the results are that the highest performing third of students continue to score very high on the SAT. They're still learning with or without supportive high school support. And then the middle tier students taking the SAT, their scores slightly dipped, but it's the bottom tier students who really fell out the bottom and really suffered that pandemic era learning loss. And so while it's very true that maybe a community college would see a less prepared student because of learning loss from COVID, the Ivy Leagues have no reason to make that argument, because their students, the top 1/3 of SAT takers, their scores did not drop at all. So Harvard could have chosen to continue taking students who scored in the 700s and who are excellent and well prepared, but they're choosing to take students who are ill prepared for ideological reasons.
What's the answer?
That's a great question. I think the answer, as far as Harvard's concerned and the SATs and other Ivy Leagues, is that they really need to get back to those standardized tests. We know they work. We know they predict. They're not perfect, but they are effective in predicting who's prepared and allowing those institutions to really service the students who are meant to be at those schools, so that each layer, each tier of schools can really best serve the students that would be best served by those institutions.
What we need is viewpoint diversity, and we need more conservative and non-ideological professors in faculty positions. We need a better slate of trustees who are going to put more scrutiny on university professors, and we need to get the cost of college down, which is not just more financial aid and more student loans that put the burden on the taxpayer, but it is about gutting out the student services and the ideological DEI offices that drive up tuition prices and make campuses toxic. And that is how you restore higher education to places of learning rather than as radical sleepaway camps.
This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.